Supplies, sharpen your knives, ready to rise when the sky turns gray. You better know the role you play. I spend my day with the information. I spit it so my people have some inspiration. It's not frustration that you hear when you saying this. It's just the passion that you hear when I'm spraying this. Elders okaying us to take the wheel, so I'ma say what I feel. After I press record, you can no longer afford to let the youth absorb this slave mentality.
Mic check. 1 2 1 2 2 1 1 2 2 1. Actually 2 2. Today's date, February 2nd, and we are back. We are live. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome, peace, hotep, shalom, greetings. Any way you might like to be greeted and welcomed, alafia. We thank you for being here. My name is the F.L.O. Xpress, or F.L.O. for short, Factual Libations for Overstanding, or Futuristic Lyrical Omniscience. And this is the Expressions of Self show, slash podcast, slash platform, slash an hour out of your day you're not getting back from listening to me babble about music and all things involved. Today, we have a very special episode lined up for you. So, it had just dawned on me. I won't say dawned on me, but today I decided to do something special for y'all because normally I kind of talk about things that I've experienced or my take or my perspective on things. And I mean, today is going to be more of the same in a sense. But, last episode I was kind of rambling about with some, sprinkled in some major announcements in there. Today I actually have a very specific topic that I would like to touch on today. And I will do my best to manage my time a little more effectively to try to keep this a little less lengthy. But I had a lot to catch up on, so this time, since I've kind of caught up on some stuff, I should have less to babble on about. But the subject in and of itself, is much to talk about. And for a number of reasons, I'll get into those certainly. One of them, I don't feel like this is something that I've heard get talked enough about. And another reason is because, the subject of today's topic has a lot to do with my childhood. And it hits me near and dear. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. For those who were maybe late 80s, early 90s babies, this one probably hits home for us. So today, what I would like to discuss is to talk about, it's not so much new, although I've heard of recent events, things like that. Today, I would like to touch on, all right, y'all. All right, we're back at it again. We are not only recording, but we are also live on Instagram. So thank you for those who are tuning in, will be tuning in to the live broadcast. And of course, always thanks for everyone that will be viewing this at a later time. I basically set this up in a way to where as though you can catch me live. It's not something I have a set schedule for as of yet. I just kind of go when the spirit moves and when time permits. So that's why you don't see me post any regularly scheduled times when I go live. I'm working to the point where, basically this is not just a hobby, and it's, more of a profession, an occupation. Something a brother is looking forward to making a living off of what he loves doing, which that also entails me sharing pertinent information about the music world. And not just, current events. I know that, we like to be abreast of what's going on in the now. That matters, as they say, no time like the present. Yesterday is the past, tomorrow's the future. I can't remember what it was. But today is a gift, that's why we call it the present, so on and so forth was a hearing I remember my high school principal telling us. And I thought he had some corny cliches till I grew up, wised up, and I was like, you know what? This old man he actually got some wisdom. So shout out to my old high school principal. Cool white dude. Cool old white dude. Just, actually I could tell he enjoyed and appreciated what he did. Like he cared about, gave a bleep about his job and such. I mean, not like he was like my hero or anything like that, but I could tell that he was sincere, type of genuine dude. So, today, I will be talking with you. I will be talking with you about my thoughts and my take, my perspective, my analysis on the legacy of the incomparable, transcending, multi-generational, multi-dimensional genius of a talent, of a gift given to us earthlings and mortals. This exceptional goddess that we had the pleasure and the privilege of bearing witness to some 20 odd years of short, quick, but highly impactful living and life, and several years and several albums of genre-defining, game-changing music that she has worked so hard to help create, and put together and share with the world before her name and number was called to return back home with the ancestors. I'm speaking of none other than the legacy of the one, the only, Aaliyah Dana Houghton. Woo! Now, I've had some time since her passing to, mourn, to grieve, to reflect. And, I'm not even, family, a close friend, or anyone that's ever, had a chance to meet her in real life. But, for anyone who can relate to how I feel about Aaliyah, her music touched you and brought you closer to her in a way that you felt like you knew her a long time. And just, her experiences, her accomplishments, her lifetime is a triumph in and of itself that's worthy of celebration and remembrance and commemoration. I know her, yeah, what is it, as of just about a moon cycle ago, it would have been, or rather, next solar return would have been 45 years since she was born. But it's been just over 44 years since she was born in January of 1979 in Brooklyn, New York. Grew up in Detroit for some time before her star-studded career would really take off in the early mid 90s and into the 2000s, before the ancestors and the Most High said, "Great job. It's time for you to come home now." And it's kind of like, you could rank her up there with the likes of like Bruce Lee, the karate, or Bob Marley, the reggae, or like Muhammad Ali, the boxing. If I'm not mistaken, no, I was about to say, wasn't he a Capricorn? But I must say that Capricorn women are amazing to me in terms of what they're able to do, their ambitions, their work ethic, their insights, their talents, just their, very loving and caring personalities. They're really great friends to have. I'm sure for those who have had the pleasure of, being, intimately involved with a Capricorn woman, I myself have had a few turns in my experience. Yeah, amazing is a word that tends to come up often when describing the powers of a Capricorn queen. And Aaliyah was certainly no exception. In fact, she was exceptionally defining, or the consummate Capricorn in terms of her ability to amaze and wow with just natural talent and ability. You know, it looks effortless and just seems so natural for them. But we're amazed. My favorite quarterback also is a Capricorn, although him being a man. But you know, shout out to my Capricorns. It is Aquarius solar phase as of this time, as of the recording. However, you know, we can't get to Aquarius before passing Capricorn. Shout out all my Capricorns. Shout out to all my Aquariuses as well. That'll probably be the next episode, to be honest with you. I actually have other topics that I'd like to get to, but you know, I'm like, man, part of this is like you know, structured. Like, you know, I'd like to have ideas and topics, but I feel like what I can do is have a fishbowl of, you know, topic names and concepts that I could come with any time, especially when I'm drawing low on inspiration, and then have certain topics that when I'm just struck or moved in the spirit to, you know, broadcast or share or create episodes for content around, I'm gonna do it. And this was one of those instances. So it's just so much to touch on. So I'll do my best to, you know, cover as much ground that I have in here. And if need be, we may have to spawn this over 2 episodes. We'll see. We're going to see how long and far we go into this. We're already several minutes into this recording. But yeah, let's get to it. Aaliyah Dana Houghton. Again, born in Brooklyn in January of '79. Some 15 years later, we would see her signed to Jive Records. Her uncle, actually, she was signed to her uncle's label, Blackground Records, Barry Hankerson. I have some comments that I'm going to get into in this episode about her uncle. But I will say that one thing I appreciated about her career, it was very family oriented. Her success was very much driven and made possible by the efforts of her family members, which is something that I like. You know, it's heartwarming to know that it was that her success was a family affair, and you'd like to think that, you know, there are a lot of artists and celebrities that were able to make their way in or break through in the entertainment industry with the help and the efforts of, you know, beloved family members and childhood friends. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's very beautiful. And anytime you're able to win together, as opposed to having to go into or go through that particular part of your journey alone or without close allies and advocates by your side. It's extremely difficult to navigate a career in the music industry or the entertainment industry without the support of loved ones. Extremely. I wouldn't say impossible, but it's pretty close to it. Without the support of loved ones and family members, now it's easier to support someone when you have already seen the fruits of their labor, but you know, the hard work, the livocation, the devotion, the sacrifice, the tunnel vision, laser sharp focus, the consistency of beating on your craft, and then sharing and promoting and presenting your gift in front of enough audiences, auditioners, industry professionals and the like, until you are able to, you know, get your breakthrough, your break into the, you know, industry of your calling, of your passion. You know, it's a process too. It's one thing I said. It's easier to support someone when they've already made their way in and they're starting to, you know, reel in some of the fruits of their labor. But when they're going through that process of getting ready for that opportunity of a lifetime, you know, it's much less difficult. It's much more difficult to see what isn't already there. You know, oftentimes it requires, of course, obviously the artist or entertainer themselves to obviously have that vision, and you know, the people that you surround yourself with when you're at this particular phase, when you're on the come up, you know, it's very important. There are a lot of people that were this close, they were on the threshold, they were on the cusp of that major breakthrough, but because they didn't have the right people in their circle, you know, they were influenced to make those wrong decisions, that one bad choice, or those several little bad choices that, you know, cost them that opportunity. Or as soon as they got in, they got booted right out because they weren't ready to maximize that window of opportunity for success in what they were doing. Very tragic. That's something that I probably will touch on as well later episode. That's another idea as far as like those who didn't make it, those who are on the cusp, those who are I don't want to say struggling, but making that push. I can definitely relate. But Aaliyah was fortunate to have family members that were working with her creatively, and then also working with her on the business aspect. And I think there were some pluses and negatives to that. Like I said, hopefully we have enough time to get into that. But we all know she broke in at 14, 15. She was signed to her uncle's label, Barry Hankerson, Black Round Records, home of the likes of Aaliyah, Missy, Timbaland, Magoo, Genuine, Playa, that whole camp coming out of the Virginia, D.C., the DMV, the lower half of the DMV. Shout out to 2 Up, 2 Down. Did I do that correct? VA. And my birthplace, Banneker City, D.C., mainly Virginia. But there's so much to touch into because the roots run deep. There were their family ties, blood ties, family ties in terms of like blood, but also family ties as far as like folks just working together and partnering together for years in the making, relationships being formed within the music industry, and folks just looking out for each other like family. It was beautiful. There was a lot of good, and there's definitely some good, some bad, some ugly to discuss about the ups and downs, highs and lows of Aaliyah's career, and I'm sure many of us will say many more ups than downs. Probably the biggest down you could say down is that very ultimate tragic fatal plane crash in August of 2001. Those are definitely some challenging times for myself and even members of my family, as we had lost a few close loved ones. So Aaliyah, of course, like I said, not being a family member, but we loved her, and we come to love her and to know her through her music, and created that relationship just from what she shared with us from her work. So it hit home. Like, I mean, that hit me hard. No doubt, no lie. When the news broke of her passing. So yeah, 15, she broke onto the scene. She was signed to her uncle's label, Black Round, who had a joint venture with Jive Records at the time, and it seemed like the guy for the job too, as far as artist development and as far as writing and producing for Aaliyah, was Robert Kelly, label mate. He was also signed to Jive at the time. Peace, sister. Thank you for tuning in. We're talking about Aaliyah's legacy, recording. So that's cool. And I know there's a lot to talk about. I had just listened to her 3 albums that she had put together while she was still alive. I went in backwards order. I started with, actually, before I even started listening to her albums, because I know it was, just last summer that Aaliyah's uncle, Barry Hankerson, had went forward with the process of making Aaliyah's music available for streaming on digital platforms. So, which was ironically, maybe not ironically, I feel like there was definitely some calculations in the timing, but just about 20 years after her passing, like to the month, the announcement was made that Aaliyah's music would be available for streaming. But, I mean, sister had sold tens of millions of records worldwide. And this is before anything got put on streaming. I'm definitely be paying attention to the numbers after some time to see how much her music will, as far as what the streaming numbers look like after some time. Oh, that's right. Um, but I'm sure they're going to be pretty substantial, and I probably will have something to say about that, or I'll probably have something to do with that, with the high streaming numbers, because I was actually listening to her work, studying, listening closely, carefully analyzing, being the student that I am for multiple purposes, actually. I'm also familiarizing myself more with the R&B sound, which has certainly evolved quite a bit. And interestingly enough, that has a lot to do with the work that she's done. She really changed the game, as far as the way R&B sounded before she ventured in as a teenager, and as she grew in front of our eyes, through her music, watching her grow and develop into, a much more sophisticated, wiser, experienced, seasoned veteran, and just a woman, a young lady, a girl growing into a grown woman in her music, through her music. And the sound as well, also growing and developing and evolving with her. And that's one thing I really respect and salute about Aaliyah, was she was not afraid to try something new. She wasn't afraid to do something different. She was different, is different, and you could see that in the music, because listening from her first album, going to the next one, it definitely wasn't the same. You weren't going to get the same old Aaliyah, In a sense, it's like, I don't know if she was really, I don't know if she had it all figured out, but she was learning a lot along the way. So how this came about for me, right? I'll get into more of her. I'll get into more of her story very shortly. So I just remember I was just riding around in my car. I do, Uber on the side, stuff like that. And I think I was on my way back to the house, or on my way to pick someone. I think I was on my way back home, or I might have had someone in the car with me, and I was just playing some tunes. Music tends to make a big difference in terms of like the experience when you're riding in someone's car. If they don't have any music playing, or not really feeling what they're playing, then it's one thing. But if they play some stuff that either you like or didn't know you like, and you're like, wow, I like that, play that again, turn that up, who's that? I get that a lot. I'm a little bit of a curator myself. But I was riding around in my car, with or without passenger. It was at night, it's dark, and not sure what compelled me to play music. Maybe it was just I felt like hearing something, and I just pulled up some random playlist. I think it was just stuff that I like to listen to, just a whole bunch of stuff, like hip hop, reggae, R&B. Wasn't anything in particular. And one of Aaliyah's songs came up, and it was called Heartbroken. For those who are very familiar with the catalog, this is off of her One in a Million album. And as I was listening, by the time the end of the song came, I was humming and singing along. I think I was definitely in some type of mood, and just hearing her singing, it was kind of singing to me, because I was a little fed up over some stuff. Felt like I was going through the motions, work wise, personally wise. I don't know, but the song came up, and I just couldn't help but notice how it was like singing to me and reaching me. So, beautiful song, mind you. Missy on the co-writing credits, Timbaland on the production credits, of course Aaliyah, and I was like, you know what? I think maybe in that particular moment is when I noticed that her music is actually available for streaming. So I was like, oh, okay, Aaliyah. So then it kind of dawned on me, because I think when I listened to it, I ran it back. I was like, this joint, it's got some bounce to it, but Shorty singing the blues at the same time. It was uncanny formula. Missy, Aaliyah, and Timbaland, can't beat that. Like that, you talk about a Midas touch effect there. Seriously, almost everything they touch turned to gold and platinum. Uh, in the '90s, without a doubt. Like, beautiful stuff. So, what I did was, um, I listened to it again, went home, and then I was just like, we need to listen to some Aaliyah. I think I went home later that evening and played her whole album, the self-titled one, her her the last album she created. You know what I'm saying? Her last album. Um, so I played it, listened to it, and I was like, wow, because I think I listened to it before some years prior, and I don't know. I didn't get the same experience. Like this time, listening to it the other night, I was studying it. I was listening very attentively, and analyzing, looking at the credits and just analyzing the melodies, the production, the lyrics, Aaliyah's vocal, chord progressions. Um, I'm not big on like singing. I don't know about R&B jargon. I'm not big on it. As far as like technique, vocal technique, and things like that. I couldn't break that down for you. Maybe I could have an expert, R&B songwriter, vocal songwriter expert kind of chime in on what that's about. But, pardon me. But I listened to her third album in its entirety. And I really enjoyed the experience. It was quite an experience. There was quite a few songs that moved me. Some of my favorites from her self-titled album are Loose Rap, It's Whatever. Most of them aren't singles. Although We Need a Resolution, obviously, that was a great lead-off track. What's it? It's another joint she did on there. We have to pull up the track list. I'm about to do that real quick. I like Extra Smooth. Read Between the Lines. That's one of my favorites. But yeah, I like Loose Rap. I like I Care For You too. Yeah, that was one of my yeah. That's also that moved me. That song I Care For You. It moves me emotionally. But yeah, Loose Rap, I Care For You, Extra Smooth, Read Between the Lines, It's Whatever. Those are probably my 5 favorites from her self-titled album. So I had to pull up the track list because I just trying to remember titles off the top of my head. Just anyways. So I listened to that album first, and then I said, okay, well, let me go back and listen to One in a Million. So I think a day or two later, I sat down and chopped that up again. Now, One in a Million, that was for me. What touches that touches there. My favorite, what may be my favorite, is the Hot Like Fire remix, because Timbaland just fucking he burned the whole lab down with that heat. Um, that beat, I don't know, it's just something about the sampling and the drum work on there. It's like, if like let's just say it's one of those beats I'd want to write something to right now. It's just, I don't know. It's that tough. Like, I mean, some 25, almost 30 years later, Timbaland's sound is eternally fresh. Um, but that album, there was some joints on there that really, really caught my ears when it first came out. And mind you, I was, a tyke. I was still in grammar school, single digits, when that album first came out. And I remember my sister, I don't know where she got it from. If she borrowed it from a friend, or she twisted my mother's arm into getting it from the store, or what. But I just remember her having the CD and me looking at the album cover. Was it a CD or maybe it was a cassette? I think, matter of fact, now I think about it, it might have been a cassette. I think for somehow, some way, I think I saw Confessions of Fire by Cameron as well. Maybe I'm bugging. I don't know. I know that was a year later. But anyways, I know that she had the album. My sister had the One in a Million album, and I remember the album cover just kind of catching my attention. I think I might have popped the tape in the deck once and listened to. I think I listened to it, not knowing what I was listening to. I don't know, but I just remember a lot of the songs that they had out on the radio at the time really grabbed my attention because I was like, ooh, for someone that didn't even know, I don't know. I didn't know much about music. I just knew that I liked it. I remember, my early years, remember listening to a lot of underground hip hop and stuff that was on the radio. And what was getting heavy rotation at the time was, stuff that Missy and Timbaland and Aaliyah were putting out. They were just really getting started in terms of showing the world what they have to offer as a creative force. Black Around Records was like I feel like they had a stranglehold on R&B in the late 90s because of what these creative geniuses were putting together. So I just remember that grabbing my attention. The title track, obviously, I was like, first of all, how many, in the 90s, how many R&B ballads did you know was out and there was crickets? You could hear crickets in the freaking background. Like I said, early Timbaland work, I don't think it gets talked about enough. The after effects, the dominoes, the subsequent dominoes to follow after, yeah, but the first few dominoes, what he was doing coming out of the Jodeci camp, and them kind of setting him in motion as far as putting him in position and teaching him a lot of game and putting him in opportunities where he could learn and apply himself and, have an opportunity to showcase his abilities and talents. That was also an interestingly timed collision course between Aaliyah and Timbaland. I'd like to get into that as well. So I listened to One in a Million, and it was just it was a beautiful album. I just remember telling myself that, Timbaland was the combination of Timbaland and Missy, as far as creative input for Aaliyah, did way more for Aaliyah than what R. Kelly did on her first album. Now listen, and I said it was only fair before I do this episode that, peace, brother, thank you for tuning in. I think it was only fair that I listened to her first album before I, made this episode, this podcast, because I needed to know firsthand what the difference was. Now, I understand. It's kind of like, the way things happen. Being 15 years old, just signed to a record label, making your first album in the 90s. The sound is evolving and changing, but you don't really know what's best for you at that point in your life, at that point in your career. So I'm sure Uncle said, just, follow me. I'm going to take you under my wing, and we're going to, make this beautiful album. Her first album was was a hit. Back and Forth, that was a hit. What R. Kelly did, or at least tried to do for her musically, I could see, I'll just say this. It just sounds like in the 90s, for a lot of, from what I heard from one of her albums, takeaways, right? And I'm about to get into those. One of my takeaways from listening to Aaliyah's first album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. We're going to get into that album title in a moment. But Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. One of my takeaways was that the sound outside of New York in the 90s wasn't necessarily as sophisticated. It was either, in the 90s, the sound coming out of New York and the sound coming out of LA, I think those two particular regions, I feel like had a clear-cut identity, distinction for how they wanted their music to sound like. And for a period of time, urban music, urban soul, urban music in the 90s, early to mid-90s, if you were making something outside of, New York or outside of LA, you were kind of like grasping for straws a little bit. the musical identity in other regions outside of those two major markets in the 90s, I don't think was as established. I guess mainly because, for a number of reasons. I mean, you didn't have social media. You didn't have, a large body of work from artists over time like you do now, certainly an abundance of references. So you were really just kind of like trying to figure some shit out and see if it worked. Now, like I said, in Shorty's instance, it worked well. She has a beautiful voice. You're working with a highly recognized, highly talented, well decorated artist and producer as well. So it just, you know, all on the same label. Figure it makes sense to go with that formula because, those are, winning ingredients. And like I said, the commercial response to the album, it went triple platinum in the U.S. and then eventually we're going to sell over 6 million copies worldwide. So, commercially speaking, it was a success. Critically, it was like, hey, solid project. Looking back on it now, it's like, wow, much has changed in R&B since, 94. But, it worked out well, the album itself. Now, of course, the shit that happened afterwards makes me wonder. I have questions for Mr. Hankerson. For a 15-year-old girl to be left around these guys, dudes that are, from the streets, unsupervised for periods of time, and for this young lady to then have to be subject to. Now, of course, we didn't know necessarily in the 90s that Robert Kelly was, a monster of a predator, as we've come to find out many years later. But I feel like, there were some lines to be read between in, namely the album title itself, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number. For a 15-year-old girl who would then be caught in, a scandal of foul, like I said, my man was living foul, man. And he should have been called out for a long time ago. To knock up a 15-year-old girl and then try to marry her without her parents' permission. And it's so unfortunate because it almost ruined her career. If not for the fact that, her uncle was connected, and the fact that, her first album was a commercial success, so, there was at least some type of, wow, he wrote a lot of that album. Shout out to Static Major. He doesn't seem like, I know he's like a footnote. Like, who is Static Major? He only wrote like the bulk majority of Aaliyah's last album. The Red album. I didn't realize he wrote so much of it. He wrote a lot of stuff though. Also coming out of the Jodeci, Devontae Swing Mob camp. Shout out to, I salute Devontae Swing, okay? Because not only is he a creative genius in and of himself, but he gets to take credit for helping out and take credit for being a part of the success of many other creative geniuses as well. As they say, it takes one to know one. Man, he is a creative genius, and he knew what creative genius was. Scary judge of good talent, because for him to basically sign Timbaland, Genuine, Static Major, Missy Elliott to his label and give them opportunities to branch out and find their own success. You could hear Missy Elliott and Timbaland make appearances and get songwriting credits on the Jodeci album. It was called Past, Present, and the Future. It's funny, I just released an album or mixtape with that title as well. Yep, damn it. Okay. That's alright. But yeah, Past, Present, and Future. That album, the future was certainly on there. If you hear their voices, you'd be like, oh, wait a minute. But yeah, shout out to them because, so much game-changing talent coming out of that label. The DMV, North Carolina, that region was becoming a hotbed of talent. Then I come to find out Timbaland is cousins with Pharrell. I think I heard him say that in the Drink Champs interview, but reading it, I was like, wow. And then he went to high school with, Pusha T and Malice from Clips. So it was like, VA, they were definitely sticking together, much like Atlanta was as well in the 90s. And that's why those two particular regions are powerhouses in the music industry because of that. That certainly is a significant factor when one of us comes up. So it's like, all right, I'm going to get you on this track. I'm going to get you on the single. I'm going to get you on this album. So that way you can go ahead and holler at the label and you get you a deal and you can shine too. You know what I'm saying? And that's how it's supposed to be. And then we come up, we can form a label together and break more new artists coming from our region. So that way we can really build up the infrastructure in our region and become a destination, for talent that wants to, folks come here. That brings tourism. Like Virginia, I'm sure in the 90s probably wouldn't look like much, but since Teddy Riley moved out there, since Lord Finesse moved out there, since, the likes of, like I said, Timbaland, Pharrell, the Clips, Chris Brown, from the underground, you got Skills as well. Since they then came up in the 90s, in the early 2000s, I'm sure there's folks that have relocated to Virginia now because it's like, hey, I'm trying to find, that place, that outlet, maybe hit up some open mics or, go to some shows, some concerts, go to clubs, try to get DJs to spin my record or get a chance to perform on stage because they're record executives or industry professionals that are camping out there, that are coming there to discover and break new talent, since there's already a lot of artists coming that have come up from that area compared to, I guess, in the 80s, early 90s when folks would just pass it by. So that matters. And that's something that I envision for Tubman City. There has been a number of artists and creative geniuses to come up out of that area. What I would like to see is, folks working more to pool resources together to make Tubman City more of a destination city for, new talent that's looking to emerge and break through the surface into the radar, things like that. I feel like there's some of that going on to a degree, especially with social media. It's so much easier for the infrastructure to come into being, come together. However, the more the merrier, the better. The more folks pulling together to make it happen, it can be even more of a powerhouse than it is and that it was, many generations ago. So with that being said, I listened to her second album, listened to her first album. So yeah, with the takeaways, and just what even before listening to Aaliyah's debut album, I knew that, One in a Million and thereafter would be a huge leap from, in terms of the sound. But in a sense, so when she dropped her first album, it was a commercial success, but what really overshadowed that was the scandal from her, I don't know if it broke out, but she got knocked up by R. Kelly. And then that's what spurred him to try to get the marriage going. Now, I don't know, maybe folks didn't know. I suppose perhaps folks didn't know at the time when she was, when she dropped her debut, that she was only 15 years old. Maybe that fact was obscured. And it's interesting now that I think about it, because maybe that was the case, that her actual age was obscured, so that way they could market. It's I don't know. I'm only speculating. I don't know firsthand or really what that was all about. But that does kind of touch on an earlier piece that I was mentioning about. Geez. Yeah, this might have to be 2 episodes. Earlier piece about artists who get signed too young. And I know in the 90s that was really a thing. Like, labels really try to, as much as I get on R. Kelly, right, for being a predator, the music industry as a whole, a lot of these corporate labels are predators or ran by predators or just ran with a culture of a predator culture. The music industry is very overoverran with predator culture. And what I mean by that is they prey and target, you know, talent that's young, underage, impressionable, easy to exploit, because not only have they yet to really discover their identity artistically, but just as a person. The more you experience with life, the more it teaches you. The more setbacks and heartaches and disappointment, unfavorable situations you find yourself in your younger years, it teaches you a lot about yourself and how to navigate more effectively your path to success as you get older, as you gain more experience in life. So, in your teenage years, early young adult years, you're much more vulnerable to being targeted by predators in the industry who, it's just so many things. They say, well, they'll tell you that your youth makes you more appealing in pop culture and on larger scale audiences and things like that. And there's some substance to it, but I tend to take that as, it's like gaslighting in a sense, because they'll wave, $100,000 check, a fancy new car, and say, hey, if you sign this dotted line right here, you can have these wonderful toys and trinkets, this bling, this drip, and be the envy of all your friends. And you get to do what you love doing. You love to sing, you love to rap, you love to make beats, you love to make music. Imagine, being able to buy your mother a new house. You ride around in a fancy new car. You get to travel the world, and really be, the envy of your friends, things like that. It sounds great when you're 18. When you're 28, you're like, look, I'm working on building a family. I need stability. I need financial security. So therefore, I'm going to thoroughly read this contract or have my lawyer review it before we sign anything. And then we'll renegotiate. We'll restructure the contract so that the terms work. When you're 18, you're just thinking about the fame, the bling, the flash, the attention, the feeling important. That your first touching money. Most of these kids come from poverty, so you wave $100,000 check or just throwing numbers around. They're like deer in headlights. But when you're 28, in your 30s, you're like, I need ownership. I need my fair share of my publishing. I need my royalties. I need all my fees for touring, for sync placements and licensing. You know what I'm saying? I need my, all of that. I don't care about the glitz and the glamour. I don't care about the attention. You know what I'm saying? I'm a grown ass man. I'm a grown ass woman. But when you're young, all of the allure of the rock star lifestyle is very attractive. When you get older, it's like, okay, been there, done that. Or you just lived enough in life to say, I'm not so much worried about being outside all the time. I just want to make great music and get paid fairly for it, so I can have a sustainable long-term career. When you're young, it's about flash or attention or stardom, clout. When you're older, it's more about ownership, security, stability, sustainability, longevity. So that's the thing. It's easier to exploit an artist when they're in their younger years than as they've grown older and wiser. So that's the thing that I really, I'm appreciative that I didn't get my big break too early, too soon. I certainly would have liked to have already been in there, but I know folks that that did get their break in their younger years, and the game and chewed them up and spit them out. and you know what I'm saying? So rather to take my time and build it up slowly but surely with a rock solid foundation than to just fly in and fly out, real quick, So there's that. And Aaliyah certainly did experience some of that in her career. But what I really appreciate was the way that she really battled through that. She didn't run and hide from, the controversy, uh, the the backlash. First of all, I don't think she should have had to really. I don't think she should have had to. How do I word this? It wasn't her fault, okay, that she was caught in a fucking scandal. Like, what do you? Because okay, even if she didn't like R. Kelly, right? Like, I don't like you. Like, nigga, I'm only here because I'm contractually obligated, and because I really believe in what you can do for my career. Let's say it was just business. It wasn't anything personal. So, even if that was the case, I like the way she didn't run and hide from the scandal, and she, used that as fuel to to get her to go even stronger and harder. I'm sure she took some time to sit it out, learn from her mistakes, lick her wounds, and then team back up with the camp to figure out how they were going to start over. So they signed it. They left Jive. Went to Atlantic. Met with the executives there, and they seemed really determined to, kind of repair or rehab her identity, her image. Not so much just from the appearance, but artistically what she was going to sound like. Because, if listening to her album, like, there was some hits, but definitely, like, there were some songs on the album that the flavor just sounded a little stale. It's like they were going into it, because in the 90s, albums don't get made as quickly as they do now. I mean, albums can be made quickly, but they don't get published as quickly because you have to ramp up. You have to, as far as ramping up the promotion and the production and the manufacturing. You have to manufacture. Imagine, right? Nowadays you could release an album before there are any printed copies, because you could just put it right out, publish it on streaming platforms. Then you could take your time manufacturing copies, because one, most people listen to stuff online anyway, on their phone or on their computer, and so that's where the bulk majority of your numbers are going to come from in today's music. And then also, nowadays the demand, which drove down the demand for physical copies. In the 90s, obviously, the only way you're going to listen to music was if you had a cassette, you had a CD, or, if you was really old school, you still was rocking with the vinyl. I'm sorry, DJs, right? DJs had to have the vinyl too to promote. DJs had to have the vinyl to promote your stuff as well. So, you had to print out the promo copies so you could distribute those to radio DJs, concert venues and the like. And then you had to go ahead and print out the actual copies you would distribute in stores. So you had to have those ready, manufactured and printed before the album could obviously be released. You had to have them manufactured, printed, and distributed, so that way all the stores that were going to sell your product actually had them on hand, so that the day the album is released, folks go in your store and go buy them joints. So that's how albums were released in the 90s, in the early 2000s. Nowadays, album gets released, you can just upload the shit, the music and the artwork and the all the metadata and all that stuff, barcodes, all that gets uploaded digitally. So you could just release an album as soon as it's ready. Not the album, they get everything together, get all the materials, the digital materials together, upload them joints to whatever platforms they're going to distribute for streaming, and then as soon as everything's ready, there it is. It's released. It's much less ceremonial than it was in the 90s, you know. But but you know, if an album gets released now, you know, at least you know if you're not really satisfied with the performance of it or the quality of it, then you know you didn't spend $20. You know, you might have spent $10 for your music subscription, but that's to listen to everything, as opposed to buying one CD for $20. And you was all pumped about it because you saw the video, you heard the single, and you were like, "Oh, I can't wait till this drops. This is my favorite artist. This sounds gonna be John Blaze. Probably gonna be more John Blaze than the last one. You know, whoop de whoop de whoop." And then you listen to it, and you know it could be, you know, a major disappointment, and you just feel like you wasted your money. So there's that. And so yeah, the way music is released now compared to then. But what I'm saying is the process took time because, you know, it took more time. You didn't have home recording studios. You had to book a studio. It's a long process to go through, much less explain. But it took more time, took more resources to record an album back then. Just because, you know, like I said, folks didn't have equipment in the house. Now unless you were already a platinum artist and you were able to afford building a home with a built-in studio, which is a great time and money saver, I'd imagine. And if you were that skilled, you know, because maybe you have a space, you have the equipment you need, and either you're the guy that can hook everything up, or you can go hire someone to come in and, you know, chop shit up. I mean, it's I don't know, but anyways, it took more time. So basically, making albums in the 90s, you know, early mid 90s, as we were getting to 93, 94, the sound was really starting to change. It was starting to modernize, expand more, and albums that were being recorded in like 92, 93, you know, that were getting released in 94, by the time it was out, it was like your sound was like it was already past the expiration date, you know. So oftentimes stuff that was released in 92 was recorded in 91. Stuff that was released in 93 was recorded in 92. Stuff that was released in 94 recorded in 93. And it was like going through the 90s with each year, it seemed like hip hop and R&B, the sound was growing and changing. With R&B, you went from like the 808s that you got from the 808s and the synthesized sound from the 80s to New Jack. Then you went from New Jack to like ballads, from ballads to like, you know, started to incorporate some more, you know, boom bap, some hip hop into it, you know, and then 94, 95, it started to have more bounce to it. It's just, it was changing. So it's like, so that first album was like, you heard an album being released in a bit of a transitional phase as far as the sound of R&B. The sound of R&B was changing because the sound of hip hop was changing, and hip hop was really starting to, you know, get a stranglehold on the music industry. It was starting to become a real force in the music industry. I mean, in the streets, it was already what it was. It was already popping, but in the music industry, hip-hop was also starting to take over, and it was becoming, you know, also expanding out to different regions as well. So her first album, you know, the sound was a little bit outdated on some of the tracks and the way it was put together. And Aaliyah, you know, of course, obviously her sound, her identity artistically had not yet been fully developed because she's still a young girl, you know, finding her way. And, you know, there wasn't really much of a reference point outside of her work or even her work itself until they made that first album. So, you know, the gift and the curse, you know, was, you know, she got that success. Her first album did well, but then the scandal overshadowed everything. And it caused her to have to, of course, obviously cut ties with R. Kelly. Even if she wanted to continue working with him, that wasn't going to work at all, you know. There was no way those two names are going to be mentioned in the same breath without controversy and backlash, you know, running amok. So she had to really start over. But the good thing was at least she had some reference point in saying, okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. So she sat down with her uncle, she sat down with Craig Cowman, and they said, look, we're going to formulate a game plan. What we're going to do is we're going to intentionally find, because what happened was one of the unintentional consequences that led to her, discovering a new sound for her music was that, not only could she no longer work with R. Kelly, because obviously of the, that relationship being mired in scandal and controversy. Like I said, much of that at fault to Robert, because he's fucking whole predator. If you listen to the album, listening to the lyrics, it sounded like a lot of those songs were written as if he wanted to hear her, like, praise his name and declare her devotion and love to him. And I'm like, this girl's 15 years old. You're a whole 20-something, almost 30-something-year-old man. Almost twice this woman's age. And you wanted to sing about her endless devotion and love to you. Is just listening to it now is like, next track, please. But I wanted to listen and study. Catch y'all the next time. Peace out. On my Instagram live, they shut me down on Instagram because I said so much. But I will. All right, and we are back. We apologize for the unexpected technical difficulties. So, if I recall, we were picking up where we left off, and I'm not gonna be here all day. But we was talking about Aaliyah's the evolution of Aaliyah's identity and sound as an artist in the earlier stages of her professional recording career. But come to find out, Shorty was connected to Gladys Knight. That's what led to her early days star search. So, in a sense, because of her family ties and her music ties in the industry, because of her family ties who already had connections in the industry, and of course an exceptional talent like young Aaliyah, you figured it was only going to be a matter of time before she caught on somewhere, somehow, in some way. And it just seems like she was always in reach of some of the giants in the industry. So it was no big surprise, kind of peeping her pedigree and her background, that she got to work, she got discovered by I won't say discovered, but that Gladys Knight got to recognize her at a very young age, and that she would later go on to record her first album with R. Kelly at the helm creatively. But I just think that, one thing she learned from her first album was that, working with a team. And I remember having a conversation with one of my close friends. Shout out to my man, Billy Rose, Mr. Rose, B. Monopolis from Tubba City. I remember him we was having a conversation. I don't know if it was just the two of us or my man Ruff was in the room as well, but he was saying how with hip-hop and R&B albums, it's essential to get creative input from multiple sources to diversify your sound. I've heard great albums that were, done by one producer. Interestingly enough, we're talking about working with different producers, but, Timbaland. Producers, as far as hip-hop, I know that, can make a great album just off of their Timbaland, DJ Premier, Pete Rock, obviously he's done that with CL Smooth, some of his own projects as well. Producers that could hold a whole project down because they're just that nice with what they do. Knife Wonder, Swiss Beats. So, there's some exceptions to the rule. If you're Neptunes, what I'm saying? These are type of producers, these type of talents can, if you was to hire them to produce your whole album, you can't miss. It's hard to miss unless you're just not a good fit for what they're going to. Usually early in your career, you might be signed to a major label that has higher aspirations, so they may want to hire what they consider to be the best available for you to get your sound out there. And they may be the best available in terms of getting recognition, getting airplay, getting good commercial reception. But as far as artistically, creatively, the fit might not quite be there. And oftentimes there are artists that said, I would have liked to work with other producers or work with more producers. But, sometimes you gotta, in a sense, Aaliyah was paying dues because she didn't know exactly what was going to be the best fit for her artistically. Maybe she didn't know for herself, as far as like who's going to be a good fit and this, that, and the third. And also it's like, hey, you're young. These people are footing the bill. Just appreciate the fact that you have an opportunity to do what you love and make a living doing that. And there's something to say about that. Your family got your back. This is going to work out well. And like I said, again, the album itself commercially did great. It was just what happened afterwards that really, flipped things upside down for her. But then she flipped it right back up. She took her time to really analyze, do some damage control, analyze what went wrong, as far as choices being made, the situations she found herself in. And, she just started from scratch, on the second album. So she, new label, new management, and they gave her, more leeway to, discover what was going to work, what wasn't. So, interestingly enough, so she's coming out of a bad situation with Jive, looking to start over again with Atlantic. And also what added to the challenge, of course, like not only just trying to bounce back from, a messy situation, to say the least, was also, a lot of producers didn't want to touch her. It was like, hey, yeah, she's got a great voice. We know she could do numbers. She could make those numbers dance on the charts and on the billboards, and number sales wise, the talent is evident, but the controversy and the headache, just like I said, the mess, the drama, you could say, that was attached to her name. Reputation is the cornerstone of power. So, her reputation had been tarnished a bit from the scandalous marriage situation, which it's hard for me to hold her accountable when obviously there's a clear lack of guidance there, from her circle. You're supposed to be around adults, professionals. Perhaps she did run off and snuck off, but again, for a 15-year-old girl married a man who's 10-15 years older than her, that's just a no-no. You don't do that. You don't exploit or prey upon, underage women. Just be happy y'all made a great album together, and, go fuck a grown-ass woman. But anyways, it's easy for me to say than for someone in this situation. Obviously, that's someone who's, dealing with some type of imbalances there. But, rants aside, she had to learn from that. She had to learn from that situation. Whether she's responsible or you hold her responsible for getting into that mess, she had to figure out a way to get out of it. And one of the things that her and the team in Atlantic agreed upon was, hey, we're going to find new producers. Not even just, it was like, well, I wanted to go a different direction anyway. Even if things had not turned out the way they did. Scandal aside, I'm sure she, was wanted to go a different direction creatively anyway. So it was agreed upon with her and the label that they were going to seek out different producers. It wasn't going to be a uniform sound. It wasn't going to be just one guy or one person, doing the production and songwriting. It was going to be a team effort there. It's going to be more of a community or team effort there. And what made it more difficult was, okay, we're going to work with more producers, different producers, but other than Puffy and Jermaine Dupri, those were the only two big names that said, sure, I'll work with her. But nothing really materialized. Like she wrote some songs, there were some sessions. She didn't have enough time to materialize anything with Puffy, who was working with Mary, who had just had a lot of success working with Mary at Uptown. So Puffy was the sought after guy. Now here's the thing. It's interesting that Puffy was getting so much credit for, producing hits in the 90s when, reading the footnotes, the liner notes, if you really knew what was going on, he was not actually creating a lot of this stuff. And it's interesting that a lot of people have a lot of heat for Dr. Dre because they said, well, he didn't make a lot of those beats. He had hired other people to put the sounds together. Okay, fine. You know, and maybe there was a lot of creative input from ghost producers, other producers that he worked with that were responsible for, the sound that he takes a lot of credit for, but he engineered that. He coordinated that. You could say he was a production coordinator. That counts for something. And as far as the quality of the sounds, like it's production, there's a lot that goes into that. So, even if he's not tapping the boards or the keys, what I'm saying, he might have someone else drawing out the melodies or putting together the patterns, but to arrange those, to engineer the sound, to get the EQs and the frequencies right. That's more of the objective side of production, but that's very much essential, just as important as the subjective side of production. And that's something that Dre has never tried to, shy away from. He hasn't so much gotten in front of it and said, yeah, I hired this person, or yeah, I hired that person, or, credit to this person, that person for making this beat or that track. But, and we know he didn't write his own rhymes, much of his rhymes, he hired a lot of ghostwriters, much like Puffy. But the only thing to me is that Puffy really tried to make you believe, or certainly allowed folks to believe, that he actually was the one making the beats. I have never seen Puff Daddy in front of a keyboard or MP in my fucking life. I've never seen it. If you have, cool. I've seen him in the studio and the mixing boards, but I ain't seen him in front of no fucking MP, padding some shit out. Now, if Puffy could do a master class on hip hop or R&B production, I'll wait. I'll see for him to get so much credit for his production. But anyways, neither here nor there. So she tried to, get something to work with Puffy. They didn't have enough time to materialize something. She had to go to Atlanta to, do some sessions with Jermaine Dupri. As far as I'm concerned, didn't hear anything, not sure of anything materializing from her attempt to work with those producers. But those are the only two names in the industry that were willing to work with her. And, they weren't necessarily moguls like they are now, but they were definitely rising stars in the industry at the time. But that nothing really materialized, so it's like, we're still looking for artists and producers that can, give her the creative juice that she needs to make that next album pop off. So there was that. So what that set off was, okay, so the Atlantic team, A&Rs, executives, they cast a wide net. They said, hey, anybody and everybody that, it's like, we're pretty much like, what is it, open auditions for, for talent, for contributing talent that we could use to really get Aaliyah's sound and music to pop off. So fresh out of the, school of Swing Mob, you had the likes of Timbaland. So this is how this all started. I'm not sure who exactly got the meeting arranged with Craig Kallman and Timbaland or Timothy Mosley, but I guess open auditions. Maybe he was just like having guys coming, just wherever they was, advertising or saying, hey, come to this building this day and time, bring your demos, bring your cassettes, bring your CDs. We'll sit down and talk and see what you have to offer. And one of the guys happened to come across was a young Timothy Mosley, fresh out of, doing sessions with Jodeci, and, soaking up, I'm sure, much crucial game from Devontae Swing. Probably put together after, I'm sure after making the album, probably during making the album, after making the album with Jodeci, the Past, Present, and Future tape, I'm sure he got inspired in the lab and just, he went away at crafting the sound. I need to know more about that process, that time in Timbaland's life. I'd say the mid 90s, before like 94, 95, early 96. I want to know more about, the time he was spending in the studio or in the lab cooking up beats, because the one thing I know about his story was that, part of what makes him so innovative was that he was making a lot of sounds. Like, as opposed to just pulling up drum samples and, you know, pre-recorded instrument samples and loops and putting those together to make beats with. Like, he would start probably with your hi-hats, your snares, you know, some percussion samples, and, you know, sampling various pre-recorded instruments, as well as, you know, sampling vinyl records and things like that to make beats, you know, in a traditional sense. But then it was like, something's missing. I need to add a little spice to it. So, I mean, my man's beatboxing. He's humming. You know, he's probably tapping, making percussion sounds with, you know, silverware and all kinds of shit around the house, outside. You know, maybe actually, you know, hand claps, you know, homemade hand clap sounds and stuff like that to add to his beats. And, you know, when he had the meeting with Craig and sat down in Atlantic and, you know, popped the demo in, you know, needless to say, Craig was wowed and he was like, Aaliyah, well, you need to meet this guy. So I think that's what got Aaliyah's attention as far as, you know, getting Timbaland and Missy, because when Timbaland went in there and played some beats, you know, Atlantic was, you know, obviously impressed. And when, you know, they had the opportunity to meet, when he had arranged for Timbaland to meet with Aaliyah, I think he had the opportunity to bring Missy along as well. And they had gotten together for a few days to record some songs. So what happened was that I think they recorded like 4 songs together, you know, their first time meeting and just working together creatively. So Missy's writing, Timbaland's pulling up the beats, producing, and then Aaliyah's, you know, of course, obviously singing and recording. And even though none of those songs would actually make the album, she loved what they were doing. She's like, okay, this is, you know, she could see, you know, I guess she could see some of that vision of what was to come from working with, you know, these very different, very creative, very hungry, very talented, you know, musicians. And of course, what we would see out of that, obviously, you know, like I said, we'll remember forever and forever change the game. But just from that session, that started the beginning of what would be truly something truly special. So you have that. And then somewhere along the lines, you know, they would, you know, obviously she'd give them some feedback. You know, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what we can kind of work on to improve, update, and this is what, you know, I like from you guys. Keep doing this. So she did that. I'm sure there was some, you know, some back and forth, some creative, you know, so out of that session, there was some collaboration and just kind of throwing, you know what, at the wall and seeing what sticks, and they were able to analyze and see, like, it just gave them a bit of a sample size of what they could do together. So obviously they came back, and, you know, Aaliyah was excited to come across people that were so creatively inclined, and Timbaland and Missy had to be equally, if not more excited, because here they are. They have an opportunity to work with a big star. You know, this could be their big break. So, you know, what you would hear on her next album, 1 in a Million, which also, you know, went multi-platinum, you know, but you could just hear the difference between her first album and her second album creatively. Like, she had definitely found, you know, a home in terms of, like, or found a winning formula, should I say. I mean, because you could say, you know, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number was a success commercially, but I think critically and creatively, you know, she knew that, looking back after that album was made, that wasn't it, per se. It was like, you know, it was great that I did well with that, but that wasn't it. That wasn't really what I wanted. It was like a start. It was like, okay, this is a start, you know, but what is it? You know what I'm saying? What is it? And Timbaland and Missy were definitely it. And it's just like, it came together in such a, I don't know how to word it, but it was like, you know, like a, you know, euphoric, you know, a utopia almost. I don't know. It just came together so beautifully, you know, and the timing of it was so beautiful because, like I said, Timbaland and Missy were looking for, you know, their big break. Aaliyah looking for, you know, a creative breakthrough. And they kind of solved each other's problems simultaneously. and the chemistry. And then also, like I said, personally, I know the relationships between those three were also pretty airtight. Just them, coming up together. It was like kind of like a we all we got type of thing, but also there was a huge level of respect and love for one another. Absolutely, I'm sure. Folks still get together to this day. Between the Mosleys, the Elliots, and the Haughtons, they get together probably every year, probably every January, every August, and do something to commemorate her and her legacy, her memory, in loving and compassionate and celebratory fashion. I would think so. So that was it. And like I said, the rest was history from there. It just kind of just took off and developed and evolved from there. But that 1 in a million was a launching pad for all three of them in a major way. And that for me was that moment in time was when I really discovered how I discovered my infatuation with music, with urban music, with hip hop and R&B, because I was listening to a lot of underground hip hop from what my brother was playing literally in the basement when I was younger. Just hang around him and his buddies when he was in college, and they would come over and play Madden and NBA Live, and it'd be KRS-One or Gangstar or maybe some Mobb Deep or something like that in the background, and some blunts going on around, and video games, guys talking shit and things like that. And just being a fly on the wall was a fun time. And I honestly don't know how much of the music I was paying attention to, but I would go back and listen to stuff that I grew up on and be like, oh, I actually can remember in my childhood being in a place, being at a time when I was much younger, when I first remember hearing this. I remember certain sounds from beats or choruses or lyrics that stuck out in my head when I was real young, that playing it later on in life, it's like, oh yeah, I remember actually hearing this. I didn't know that that's it's funny how memory can be triggered, because stuff that you'll hear in your childhood years, you might not ever remember it again unless it comes back up. But then it's as if you was there yesterday, remembering what was going on and what took place when you first heard something, musically. That's a big part of my journey, with music, and also just, my life. Music definitely is, a timestamp. So, with that being said, I'm about to wrap this up shortly. But with that being said, I had, just recalled that being an unforgettable time in my life, just really discovering this thing called music, black music, and really, the more I'd hear it, the more I'd like it, the more I'd get a fascination with it. I actually, not too long after hearing 1 in a Million, when it was still fresh, I actually started to venture into writing raps and freestyling and, just having fun. Nothing I would ever take serious, just to pass the time. It was kind of like playing a game, playing a sport. I was playing Pop Warner football. I'd be outside with my neighbors, or my sister's friends, or I'd hang around with my brother and his buddies, play video games, or go over a friend's house from school, play video games, stuff like that. Writing raps was just one of those things I enjoyed doing, like anything else, during that time in my life. But of course, obviously, like I said, this life chose me in terms of poetry, in terms of creative writing and expression, and venture out into, music production and the likes, and actually pursuing a career and a business in creating. And, this podcast really allows me that space to unpack and unravel my experiences in that process. Let's just say my life experience in my life and experiencing, listening to and creating music is it's quite a process, and it's a lot to unravel and unpack in that 25, nearly 30-year process at this point of experiencing music, listening to it and creating. It's been a part of my life for a long time, and I appreciate it. I'm thankful to thankful to the Most High for having this relationship with music, because it certainly has been a saving grace and an outlet for me in times of need, and also, you know, just times of enjoyment and leisure and pleasure. And I claim, in the name of the Wombniverse, I'm claiming it, that this is going to lead to, you know, some of the biggest breakthroughs and, you know, blessings that I'll experience in my life, and, you know, also the legacy that I will establish and pass down to my children and their children moving forward. Ashe. So I wanted to touch on this, and I'm going to discuss more about my takeaways from what I've experienced, because I listened to Aaliyah's first 3 albums, I listened to Timbaland and Magoo's first album, I listened to Missy's first album, I listened to Genuine's first album over the span of the last several days leading up to recording this episode. So I'm going to get into that more. I see the time is of the essence, so I'm going to leave on this note, just sharing, you know, my reactions, or just experiencing what was going on at the time, my analysis. But I'm going to get a little bit more in depth to the music. Not just my experience and what I felt and what I remember listening to it, but the actual music itself. I'm going to get into that either next episode or a later episode. I may, you know, kind of circle the wagon a little bit and come back around a little bit later. Maybe there's more than I'd like to listen to and analyze before I really showcase the spotlight on the actual work itself. But the journey leading to the work is certainly, that's fascinating. Because I was listening to I just heard a song, decided I wanted to study the catalog, and then listening to the catalog. When I break down people's catalog, it's not just listening to the sounds. I now need to know. I need the background. I need to know the relationships that were formed. I need to know the events that took place. You know, I need to know all the contributing team members. You know, the folks that were behind the scenes to help make things happen, because, you know, last thing to grow on the tree is the fruit. So when you see the album and the cover and you hear the music and the videos, things like that, there were cameramen, there were engineers, there were producers, there were, you know, executives, A&Rs, you know what I'm saying? Somebody had to take a chance on that somebody to put them in position to shine when the opportunity arose. And had they that day just felt different, or if they were in a different place, if they didn't make it to that space on that day to meet that person, to make that connection that would then, like, you know, change the landscape of a whole genre for generations to come. It's like, what would have happened if something different happened, you know? What if Craig said, you know, this outer space shit that this Timothy guy has going on, like, this is corny. You know, this is way... Imagine he didn't believe in Timbaland. Aaliyah probably would have never heard of him. Him and Missy might have been, I don't know, you know, Missy, you know, they could have been doing real estate or something instead of actually being, game-changing musicians as they are. But, so I'm going to end it on this note, and, we will definitely resume at a later time, not too much later. You know, it takes a lot of energy to talk for over the hour, even when there's nobody actually, like, sitting there and watching and listening to what you're doing. So talking for an hour and a half straight takes a lot of energy, so pardon me if I yawn. But I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in to another wonderful, beautiful, glorious recording episode of our wonderful show. I'd like to tell y'all, please stay tuned. And again, F.L.O. Xpressionz Volume 3, The Past, Present, and Future, is out now. It's on my YouTube channel. It's free. All you got to do is click on the link to stream it on your phone, on your computer. You know, it's 9 tracks of, you know, some of what I have to offer. I really feel compelled to, put as much music together to show what I'm capable of at this particular point in my career. And listening to a lot of listening to, really being able to study the Black Round Records catalog, really was a bit of an inspiration. Shook things up in terms of how I can, wreck shop in different ways with my production. Because much like Timbaland, his style doesn't fit just one particular niche. It's not just a one-trick pony as far as what he can do with his sound. Like, that's a very multifaceted sound talent that Timbaland has to offer. So that being much of an inspiration, I'll talk on. It's hard to describe in words sometimes, but Timbaland has been very much an inspiration to me, especially as a producer. But he goes beyond that because he's an artist, he's a rapper. He can do so much. Like the producer in him is more than just putting sounds together. He's really an orchestrator or a mad scientist when it comes to all the ingredients that you need to make a great song, to make a great album. So shout out to him, and shout out to Missy for her great songwriting abilities. Legendary artist and songwriter. And shout out to her resume. It just really speaks volumes, literally. And shout out to, and salute to Aaliyah, for her, not being afraid to step up to the forefront and let her light shine. It's even though the artist gets the most recognition for being the face of their sound, as much attention, recognition, fame, glory goes with it, it's a lot of responsibility and scrutiny, criticism that comes with it. I'd only imagine how she would have navigated her level of influence and success in the social media era. And me personally, in the words of, to paraphrase King Crooked, bleep, you're not Aaliyah. I have a hard time disagreeing that, a lot of, as much as there are, great legendary R&B artists, I'll say any artist that came out after Aaliyah, certainly after her passing, they don't measure up. I don't know of an R&B artist that came out after Aaliyah passed that you would say is better than Aaliyah. I call her the Biggie of R&B. You know what I'm saying? That's my take on it. But thank y'all for tuning in. We're gonna say peace. We're gonna say love. We're gonna say hotep. Thank you again for listening and tuning in. Stay tuned. I will have another great episode for y'all. Volume 3 again. My mixtape's on my YouTube channel. Go stream that. I will be launching Volume 4 very shortly. My Earth Day's coming up, so be on the lookout. It'll be out on or very shortly before or after my Earth Day. Volume 4 will be available for streaming, for download, as well as, it'll be available for download. Oh, yeah, it's for streaming. For download, but it'll be exclusive. And I'll also have my merchandise available. I'll be launching my merchandise available as well to also celebrate and commemorate the release of these two projects. But, I appreciate the time that I've taken to make these projects and to also venture into and learn more and apply myself in terms of the marketing and the promoting arena as well, because an artist is hard to eat when without the fans, the supporters. So I'm promoting myself to get more support, and what I have been doing along the way in that process is also beating on my craft, developing my sound even further, pushing the envelope, branching out, upgrading my arsenal, so that way you'll be able to hear more production, better quality, shit's doper, more potent sound. So these two projects, certainly been a showcase of what I have done over the past several years, recent years. And I look forward to, my next release, which will be, from scratch, what I can do now, the evolution and the progression of my skills since these releases that I'm putting out now, to just show the progress that I've continued to make as a creative, and to give y'all just even more banging shit to enjoy for years to come. Like, if you hear Volume 3 and you like that, look forward to Volume 4. You purchase a t-shirt, a hat, or a coffee mug or something with the album cover on it, and you like Volume 4. If you like Volume 3, I know you're going to enjoy Volume 4. And if you enjoy Volume 4, just wait until Volume 5 and I start actually making official studio albums. These are mixtapes that I've been putting out. But once I make albums, once I start making my first album and beyond, it's going to sound even better. Shit's going to even smack, it's going to slap even harder. So thanks again for your support, for your attention, for tuning in, for your time. And I'll continue to provide great conversation for you as well as great music. That's my promise to you. All I ask is that you just continue to, support, stay tuned, subscribe, follow me on social media. All of my contact information is listed, in the description. Follow me on social media. Subscribe to my YouTube. I will be launching a newsletter as well. Sign up. Stay in touch. With your phone number for text or your email for emails. So that way, when the more and more I'm putting out, when we get this thing to full time, I'm going to have something new for you every several days, every strong, something for you to listen to, something for you to watch, and have updates for you on a regular basis, on a very much more consistent basis. And your continued support will allow me to go even harder in the paint for y'all to continue to make more content and better music. So with that note, I say peace, love, hotep, take care, love.
This next jam is livicated, especially for those who ain't already familiar with who I am, what I do, and how I get down. My name is F.L.O, which stands for Factual Libations Overstood. So without any further ado, allow me to explain the meaning in a little more detail. Check this out. Who am I? The flow is organic and pure for the planet. More stamina when I'm jamming the tour, they go bananas.